Souse us therefore in the powdering tub of thy mercy,
that we may be tripes fit for the heavenly table.
Welcome, Meatsmiths. You are listening to a Meatsmith harvest, restoring husbandry to prosperity,
by means of the traditions of our fathers. This Farmstead Meatsmith production is made possible by you. If you like it, please consider supporting our team by going to patreon.com/Meatsmith and donating at a level you'd enjoy giving at. Your gift helps us increase the quality and quantity of all our free media education. Thank you, and happy harvesting. I think we're here, everybody. Welcome, Meatsmith, to a Meatsmith harvest, and we are joined with Ross McKnight, who we interviewed, I don't know, a handful of months ago. No, it was over a year ago, actually. And so much has happened to both of our families since, and including some partnership that we've concocted. So we wanted to have you on, Ross, and talk about all the things there are to talk about. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Ave Maria.
Grazie plena.
It's nice to join hands in bigotry with you.
With all of our preconceptions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good to be here. It's really nice to see y'all.
Yeah, I like your flag in the background. What?
Thank you.
But I do not recognize it. I'm actually a little jealous.
Haha. Well, you'll be down here in Louisiana, so maybe we can procure one. But this is this is a very cheap one. But this is the Acadiana flag, or the Acadian flag of Louisiana, because there's an Acadian flag for, of course, Acadie, Nova Scotia. But yeah. So there you go. You've got the castle for, the House of Castile, and you've got the three fleur-de-lis for the Bourbon reign. And to be perfectly honest, I have no idea what the star's for. I think I knew at one point.
Yeah.
But what should be up on the other wall is this one, which I don't know if you've seen it, but we had this done here in Louisiana. I'll kind of hold it up a little bit so you can see it.
Oh, wow.
That's beautiful. There you go. Yeah. So that is what the flag of the nation of France should look like today.
Okay.
Although it could have been white, depending.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the flag that we're using for La Nouvelle Vendée, which is sort of our, Catholic social movement.
Yeah.
Here, so
in Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Does that flag have anything to do with the heir? With what's his name? You know his name.
Henri
the
de
heir,
la Croix?
Yeah, the heir to the throne of France.
If anybody recognizes the name that I just said, email me or give me a call, because that was probably the most arcane thing I could have just said, actually. The current eldest heir of the Bourbon line is Louis XX.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Known, though. So there was I don't remember the names. I just know sort of the general history here. But during the Bourbon Restoration, they were offering the eldest heir at the time the crown of France. The French Republic was.
Wow.
And so he was living in Germany. And I apologize if I get some of these details mixed up. But basically, they offered him the crown. And one of the visionaries, I believe, of La Salette went to go see him and said, "You have to refuse the crown."
Wow.
He said, "Because you're not the heir."
Okay.
So I'm glad we jumped straight into like
Yeah.
the ether. But the idea here is that so this goes along with the situation with Louis XVII,
Okay.
right? The young king who was imprisoned at 11 years of age, and who allegedly died in prison.
Mm-hmm.
However, some say that the corpse that was found was that of a 14-year-old boy, not an 11-year-old boy. Mm-hmm. And those corpses look different. You know, they're on either side of puberty. So, right. So that's the kind of weird, you know, it's almost kind of like the whole like Romanov mystery. It's really interesting. So, but I forgot, I think it's Xavier Reyes is the name of the gentleman who wrote the book kind of connecting all of these dots. Yeah. So it's possible that the eldest Bourbon heir is unknown to the world.
Oh, wow. Okay. And that's different than the current Duke d'Anjou.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
What some people call Anjouism. So you've got you've got the Anjouists, I guess, and then you have the Orleanists, you know, the Orleanists, and those are sort of the two disputing factions within, you know, French legitimacy, which is the idea, of course, of who's the legitimate ruler of France, which would, of course, be, if you're Catholic, you know that this would have to be the eldest Bourbon heir to the throne, or whoever that is, right? Because of the way that kingship works in the whole shape of the world under Christ the King. So
right. Yeah. But wait a minute, Ross. I thought kings were bad.
Definitely the worst. Yeah. I think, you know, it's really terrible, but under George III, the effective tax rate was 3%. So kings are definitely the worst, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And as the head of the Anglican Church, George III very nefariously permitted Catholics to exist in Quebec. And
that was his big crime.
You can't do that.
Yeah.
We had to declare our independence from that silliness.
Yeah.
At least we felt like we had to. Apparently.
That's where I'm foggy on the history. So who was the King of England during the time of the Great Expulsion? Do you know? Well, I wonder if Mr. Google Pants knows.
Yeah, probably.
Because he apparently was not in favor of that.
Yeah,
I really shouldn't be doing this right now.
During it was King George the Third was during the Revolution, or no, it was King George.
Yeah,
but I don't know which.
No, George
Roman numeral.
Oh, this is terrible. Neither of us know any history, but we're talking about history as if we know something about it.
Well,
that's right.
Let me jump in here really quick because our audience might be. I'm barely keeping up with you guys, and
I'm not keeping up.
What you mentioned at the very beginning, which is the new Vendée.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
That is maybe a starting point. That was a starting point for me, learning about the Vendée Revolution and understanding the genocide that happened in France that no one knows about, and then it sort of carrying over the Atlantic in Louisiana, and that's kind of where you're coming from a little bit, and then together.
Quite literally, I think.
Yeah. And then like you were just part of this major conference called the New Vendée with Mike Church, and he's part of the Vendée Radio, and like a lot of these.
That's different, but carry on.
Vendée Radio is great. I was just listening to Dr. Mark Haugen on Vendée Radio. Yeah.
Okay. Well, then we can plug that too, even though it's not Mike Church. Sorry, Mike Church.
His Crusade Channel.
Crusade Channel.
That's right. Which is related. Yeah. And then there's Matt with the what's
Michael
his name?
Matt. The Michael Matt.
Yeah, and he was at this conference. And anyway, all these figures are talking about what we're talking about, but probably better.
Well, we're just infantile. We're infants born in a republic, and we're like, what's a king again? And it is this strange, like, esoteric concept, because we have been egalitarianized to lockdown, like all the way to being locked down into our homes, philosophically and mentally and in every way. And so it's such a strange thing to think about monarchs and kings in the old world ordo.
And we have
ordo.
Like, we're kind of amateur historians in that sense, in the best sense, in that we love the idea of royalty and monarchy.
An old ham, which I feel like would be the flavor of, well, perhaps foie gras, actually, of old monarchy.
Yeah.
If it has a flavor. Yeah.
But you've been steeped in these conversations more than we have. We just sort of peer in from the outside, and we're really fascinated by it, and we love it. We just don't know that much about it, but
none of us do. No, and I'm an infant also, and so, but it's the reason we are is because as you've mentioned before, we have no idea how communist we are, and we're sort of like. And then the more you learn about monarchy, for instance, the more you realize how communist you are and how brainwashed you are and how bad things are as far as education and the cultural narrative and everything. Because monarchy is in fact quite beautiful. One of the most beautiful parts being that the king really doesn't have much time for you. So
isn't that great? Yeah, I think if we were just plunged into a monarchical world, in a time machine or something, we would think we were in anarchy for a while. I don't think we would recognize it. We would think, this is crazy. There's no regulations. What's happening? There's no speed limits. And I think that's what it would feel like to us, because we have grown accustomed. We just swim in the water of centralized power on every level, centralized resources, centralized food, and all regulated, which is why I think it is an assertion, at least of delight, an assertion of delight in the domestic scale, which is the irreducible unit, the family fiefdom, to compel families persuade them to produce beautiful things worthy of the dignity of the family, like foie gras, and worthy of the feasting family that is living in. So I think that, like, my political strategy is make 2-year-old ham and foie gras for your home and celebrate feasting and fasting duly. And if you do that well and go to mass and are in a state of great grace, you'll probably either, restore the old world order and all that is good, or be martyred, more likely the latter. And they're both, to die is Christ and to live is gain. So they're both good. But I think the simple order of the home is an assertion. It's part of that.
And I would add just the little footnote to that would be without the permission of your government.
Yeah.
In any of that process. Can I raise my pigs this way? Can I process them this way? Can I kill them this way? Can I educate my kids this way? Can my marriage have some sort of sovereignty outside of what the government tells me is my merit? It's a cascading effect, a ripple effect.
Yeah.
In some way related to this is the gentleman's name is escaping me right now, but there's a book that I'm about to read and I haven't read yet, but I listened to the author speaking about it, and it's called The Sacramental Kingdom of St. Louis IX. And he talks about the king's concept of his relationship to the peace, or what is the king's peace. in fact, it's reference to Christ, and that, in fact, the king is not the author or the creator of the peace, but he's the one who simply is custodian of the peace and maintains it. Very similar, of course, to the way we look at the papacy, which is, the papacy doesn't own tradition. It doesn't own the liturgy. It's supposed to keep it and to guard it and to disseminate it.
Yeah.
And so all those things that you mentioned, right? Like the peasant on his 40 acres, because the average French peasant in medieval France had 40 acres, right? Just think about that for a minute.
Wait a minute, Ross.
Poverty.
No.
Poverty.
They were all
Poverty,
oppressed.
Right? Yeah, all oppressed. Think about the 40 acres and a mule thing, though, in that context.
Yeah.
It's just nuts. It's like, oh, look, you can have 40 acres and a mule. It's like, oh, great. I had a lot more than that in the old country, Yeah. It's very bizarre. And anyway, so, but all those things that you just described is fasting, feasting, living well, living the sacramental life of the church, were things that that a king like Louis IX would have handled with kid gloves, right? Because that's what he wanted to flourish. And that's what he did throughout his entire reign in reforming the structures of the medieval secular hierarchy, especially with baronial, the baronial structures and all of those things. And I think he did a lot to reform the feudal structures as well. So anyway, and of course, the beautiful thing about monarchy being it's sort of like a pyramid, right? In that at the very top is the king, yes, but guess what? He's got the smallest piece of the power, right? He has the highest level of authority, but the smallest amount of it. And so just like we are here in our homes trying to build our little kingdoms, he really had no interest in stepping in and messing with that domestic order. Didn't even know who you were, probably didn't know how many subjects he had. Right. or which province Dulon was in. I don't know. It's just it's a beautiful thing. It's so, but and I think there's hope for that, possibly even in the near future. We obviously have absolute certainty that the Immaculate Heart will triumph, and so what that should give us is tremendous confidence and inspiration and energy, because we know what the end result is. We know that the Immaculate Heart will triumph. We know that, of course, Christ will come. And so, whereas with the narrative of the egregore, we're made to feel like we have no power and we're so weak and there's nothing we could possibly do, and all we can do is passively keep our heads down and pray and suffer, which we are called to do. But there are more active ways also in which we need to suffer in order to prepare the social order for the coming of Christ, for the salvation of souls. So anyway, I know this has a lot to do with foie gras, but it actually does.
That's the challenge.
It's kind of what drives us too behind the scenes. I mean, we've been thinking about these things for 4 or 5 years now, probably. At the beginning, I was like, this is crazy. I can't go here. But you're right. Like, the more you think about it, you realize, wow, I have been brainwashed in so many ways. And even the idea of, like, you were talking about power and authority, we just conflate those two nowadays. We think they're the exact same, and they're truly not.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about even, and on a domestic scale, like, you have complete authority, I have next step authority over the kids, but we don't have that much power. We're being like slaughtered.
Oh, absolutely. Heavily outnumbered.
Yeah.
It's so true. The family is
Battle
such
of Culloden over here.
Yeah. And you especially notice it when your children get older and you realize that power is just a purely material thing. This is why Sauron could not anticipate the secret weapon of the little tiny hobbit, right? This is the whole paradigm. And when you suddenly stare at a 14-year-old who is taller than you you realize that your power over him is evaporating. It is diminishing. But, the authority is still there, and it's on him by virtue of the fourth commandment to honor his father. And I can offer him counsel, and especially, if a mother is staring at her, 15-year-old, 6'2", whatever, child, you realize that the power has evaporated, and what you have is more along the lines of authority. And you can offer them counsel. You can help them, you can appeal to their reason, but you're probably not going to be doing any physical restraint or discipline at that certain point. So the difference is very clear in the family order. And it's interesting, you see the breakdown of that now we only understand or experience governance as power, because that's the only other option. Once you have undermined the idea of authority itself as inherently oppressive and arbitrary, ergo not worthy of our obedience, all you're left with after that is coercion to get things
brute force
done. And it's I get asked this question a lot, and I'm sure you get certain versions of it too, Ross, as a producer of good things. In this country, at least right now, if you produce good things, the inspectors really want you to not produce the good thing. They want you to do it in a way that is legal and accords with their policies, or to at least do it with their licenses and all of that. And it is interesting because I get asked a lot, do you have a license? And I'm okay saying this publicly, I guess. I'm deciding I'm okay with this now. I've never had one.
I'm walking away.
Because the scale is so small, it's never made sense. But it's interesting once our default mode is to ask permission to produce a very essential good. Right. That's the default mode. And we learned that. That's why, like you said, we're Americans. We're pretty good communists.
Yeah, it's super communist. It's like the definition of I need permission to feed myself.
Yeah.
In fact, I need permission to go put a line in my pond, technically, right?
To use your water.
To do it, to breathe. So it's it's land of the free, home of the breathing.
Well, if we've gotten rid of property, it's like a soft way of saying it's not really your property.
Yeah.
Well, no, like property tax, which there's some interesting, I don't know if y'all have looked into this at all, but property tax is of course completely actually illegal in the United States, the whole structure of it. Unconstitutional, whatever that means for whoever cares. Anyway, so there was this case in Florida where this gentleman, and I might not have the details completely straight, but he wasn't paying property tax. The county seized his home. They sold it to someone else. He turns around, decides to do a little research, and sues the county. He wins. I think he gets something like $50 million from the county. They ask if they can just go ahead and buy the house from him, because someone's already living there. And he's like, well, no, that's my house. So the family had to leave. And then as part of the settlement, he doesn't have to pay for water or electric for the rest of his life. So these things are out there. Not everybody has the resources to go and do that, because it's an uphill battle. But it's true. It's very true. And I think there's this gentleman, Brandon Sibley, who's very much on this train and educates a lot of people about it. Alphonse Fagiolo also. But I think he also doesn't pay property tax, and he's a landlord. But these people have spent so much time educating themselves on the legal system, so they understand the sort of esoteric parts of how municipalities work and all of that the rest of us don't have time for.
Great.
But it's fascinating to see the people who do have time for it have found out that, in fact, if you're willing and you have the time, you can fight and win even through the broken system, because 80% of what the municipalities do and the corporations that are these counties and cities and all of that, right? The things that they do to us or assess are illegal. Under our own laws. So it's fascinating. My dad and I have talked about buying just a random little piece of property and then just not paying taxes on it, and and just waiting for that tax sale notification or something, and then going ahead and suing the parish. But I don't know if we'll ever do it. But it's kind of like on the list. When we have all this extra time, we'll do that.
Yeah, it's amazing how upside down it transforms the system, because you actually get to this thing that I think the author of Ecclesiasticus or Ecclesiastes says is a great evil under the sun, which is basically you get some individual judging the product of your craft or the product of your labor. If you're a builder, he's judging your house, and he is actually not even close to being as competent or having the expertise as you, the house builder or the architect or the food producer or whatever it is. And this is a grave evil under the sun. And anyone who has experienced that phenomena knows. I grew up, my dad was a builder, building beautiful residential homes. He overbuilt things like magnanimously. It's ridiculous. The houses were continuous solid pieces that could be moved. It was ridiculous, way beyond. And then the inspector, inevitably in accord with the local policy and law, would have to come and sign off on each stage of the project. And in California, it's particularly pernicious and ridiculous. And, it would just be a moment before the inspector even realized that he was looking at the blueprints upside down while he's there, making sure they did everything. And then the skilled builder would have to tell him, oh, well, you see that through bolt, it does go into the slab when you just flip it around and you look at it right side up, not just daylighting into the sky. And it's like,
this way up, this way's down.
Yeah. That happened. Every project he ever did, that was standard operating procedure. And there's a grave disorder there where he actually has to subject himself not to the authority, but to the coercion of that policy enforcer, because that person could take away your license, red tape, yellow tape the project and say, stop, you can't build anymore. And it's gross. It's not good. One thing that doesn't happen in that context is the building of magnificent cathedrals that last for millennia and that take, 650 years to construct. That's not a thing that happens in that context.
Yeah. And somehow they're still there. I don't know how.
Strange. No inspectors.
It could be the knowledge of the direction that is upward and the knowledge of the contrary direction that is downward.
Yeah.
But it's just speculation on my part.
Yeah.
The poor's head in hand bear I, bedecked with bays and rosemary.
How many people do you know who are building their home culture around seasonal harvest and feasting? Or that are hunting as you are for self-sufficiency and back-to-the-land values? Or that share your artist's passion for human-scale meatcraft? At FarmsteadMeatsmith.com, we've created a community of hundreds of omnivores from around the world with these shared goals, and 2 major places for them to learn from and inspire one another. First, we have our semi-annual hands-on educational event, The Family Pig, here at our Heartland homestead in Oklahoma. Come meet Brandon, get your elbows greasy, and over the course of 3 days, kill, cut, cure, and cook 2 pigs completely. You'll rub those greasy elbows with other meatsmiths from around the country, sharing meals and conversations to inspire you for years to come. Secondly, for more remote learning, over at farmsteadmeatsmith.com, we host a purely digital membership program with an archive of film and textual resources 5 years deep now. And both our on-site classes and online program include access to our most unique and rewarding private community Facebook page, Meatsmith Table, which is the only international network by and for homesteaders harvesting animals on a domestic scale using traditional and regional methods. We've been told that our classes are life-changing and the membership program unparalleled in quality and quantity. To get a taste of our education, search farmsteadmeatsmith.com and our YouTube channel for our free films, conversations, and downloads. Explore how we and other meatsmiths across the globe may best come alongside you and support you in building your home around the harvest. Please head to farmsteadmeatsmith.com today.
It's not that we're trying to be pro-anarchy or something, but because I think we would both say that there is oversight, just not from an inspector. The oversight is called our Lord.
Yeah.
And being in grace, because I am an idiot. I actually can't build a cathedral. I can barely teach my 5-year-old how to read. I can't make really nice prosciutto, but
you probably could.
I need grace to do anything well. And so the oversight is I am enlightening my mind with the help of the church and the sacraments that keep me on my toes and are helping these light bulbs go off, because it's a recognition that I'm not like super powerful. Like I do need help. I do need grace to help me.
I think the standard is pretty low to have a totally flowy, perfectly functional economy without any inspection. Like we could just get rid of that on every level, because it just comes down to the most elemental low-grade virtues. This is it's not complicated. It gets excessively complicated and unmanageable when it's 1, centralized, and 2, everyone is vicious.
Right.
And then you get problems. Like you are never going to extract, something from your farm, whether it's a duck or anything, and sell it to someone if you would not feed it to your own children. Like that's not happening because you have virtue. It like on the most just basic level. Like I'm not.
That's the claim.
If I would, that's the claim anyway. But that's like it's a good test. I mean, I can't even conceive of processing a beast in some way and being disgusted by it somehow. Something goes wrong, and actually delivering that to a customer, like no way. My litmus is it's the simplest. This is why I say it's such a low grade, simple, elemental virtue. It's like do unto others. If I would not eat this prosciutto, I'm not going to give it to someone else. Shockingly, we don't have that in the centralized food production system. There are plenty of farmers with hog barns that do not eat the pork from their own barns. That is actually quite common. It's gross.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want the pork that's raised on concrete. That's just gross. Sorry.
Right. But we'll sell it to the country.
How great it is as much as you want, and how the benefit of pigs not being susceptible to sunburn, and how they wash down the floor all the time, and how the pigs can get away from their poop, and how they're social, and how they don't root and destroy the pasture, and all of those benefits of raising pigs on concrete. It's that proud. And then when you walk into the barn and it's not just a video and you smell it.
That's the giveaway. Yeah. Smell.
Yeah, it is. It's funny too, because economy just has its own checks and balances built in. If I do deliver you a duck and there's an abscess in the breast.
Yeah.
I won't see you next time.
Right.
We're talking about, like, you said elementary. It's almost like this is like, it's not even like, no one has to think about it. No one has to reason very much. You're just like, oh, that's not good. I won't buy that again.
Yeah.
I'll move on to the guy who does it better.
Right.
Yeah.
Very strange.
And all the outbreaks and the crazy, horrible things of foodborne illnesses that keep us fearful and thinking that all the restrictive policies are so essential. The outbreaks are born of the centralized system.
Correct.
That's what they come from. Like botulism, that was not a thing. Like there's this crazy idea that since Julius Caesar, people were just dying eating salami, just dying for 2,000.
Couldn't figure it out. Just dropping dead.
Yeah, botulus. Like, oh, that's the name for. They even called it botulus. That's the name for salami, even though they're like putting the chicken way before the egg on that one. But you'll read this in charcuterie books, and it's just silliness. It's like, no, that didn't happen until we started centrally producing food in anaerobic environments in cans, and then
in cans.
We found, right, in jars, and then we found, oh, wait a minute. There's a toxin that's released that's super extra deadly and we can't smell it or taste it. What is it? And then they postulate that it is theoretically possible that it could happen in your homemade salami. Even though I can't find a record of that ever occurring ever.
You'd have to be really
in the last 150 years.
To be pretty malicious about your salami production. Have a great amount of self-loathing.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've made bad salami that when I my first attempt at making saucisson, and let's see, was that the first attempt or the second attempt? I was experimenting trying to use the duck esophagus as a casing.
Oh, cool, dude.
It was super cool, but it was not great. It's too thick. It's just too thick. So even pricked with holes and everything. So anyway, I made bad salami and I ate it.
Nice. You're still here.
Incredible.
It's one of those things. I just don't know what you would have to do. And I don't know that it could have been much worse either.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how that happens, but the cans definitely, that's super gross. It's super gross to can meat. And I started off doing that again because of the regulations. And until I talked to my second inspector and he was like, oh no, you don't have to can it. And I was like, okay, well then I definitely won't. And it's like, I don't understand how that happened, but I don't know there's no natural inclination to put meat in a jar and then submit it to high pressure and heat and then.
Right. Yeah, nor any pre-modern tradition of that. I know I've never canned meat, and I encounter a lot of people who ask me if I can meat and the like, and it's like, no, I super don't. But if I'm strictly honest, it's because it's so much easier just not to. And I don't like the flavor of canned meat because it doesn't ripen. You're also you're kind of holding it in suspended animation in a way. And you have to do it exactly perfectly right, or you will get botulate, toxin release in the can. It absolutely will happen.
There's not a great margin of error. Right. It's either right or it's very, very wrong.
Yes, exactly. And the cool thing about not canning and preserving with more simpler methods is that there is so much forgiveness.
Oh yeah.
I do have a personality type that makes me almost incapable of measuring ingredients. I almost cannot do it, but it's great because it doesn't matter. When you use the traditional cures, they turn out so good every time, and it's not like I'm doing the same thing perfectly every time. Recipes ultimately are they're even more work than is necessary when it comes to just doing things simply. and being more docile to the yield that you do get, which will vary as it ought.
Yeah,
because
get 1 pound of chicken livers. You need 1 pound of chicken livers. You need 1 cup of onions. You need 3 cloves of garlic. No, I don't. This liver is not 1 pound. I was making a pate the other day, and I was just kind of like, okay, what are the ingredients that Chef John Fulse puts in this? But then that's just like the point of departure, because you're right. Everything varies, and pate is actually extremely simple, and you do everything to taste. Yeah. Like, what do you like? How do you like to make pate? Okay, good. Yeah. Go right ahead. And then the same thing. I was testing out 2 methods of making capicola, and one came out badly and one came out really well. And but the great thing is that the focus is not at all whether or not you're going to kill yourself. The focus is just, how do I make this good? Yeah. And so I have one capicola that will just end up being, I guess, minced and used for, seasoning dishes. But now I know, right? But I wasn't worried. If I don't wrap this one in cheesecloth, will I die? If I do wrap this one in cheesecloth, will I die? It's more like, let's test this out and see which one comes out better.
It's very simple.
I think
I have a quick question about your pate.
Sure.
I'm going to tell you how I make pate. My goal is, and I only realized this after tasting it. This is just like tasting things. I want to turn the liver into a blended up matrix that can hold the maximum quantity of butter possible. That tends to be how I make it. So do you put any butter in your spreadable? Maybe not the foie gras pate, but the normal pate in the beautiful jar with the fat cap that you make. Do you put butter in that?
Okay, so you might be actually referencing the foie gras pate, which because of the effort that goes into producing foie gras itself, I do not make that pate, but a family member does.
There you go.
And the recipe is secret. Anyway, but but I'll just say there's probably not much butter in there because the foie gras itself is like that beautiful emulsion. But as far as I was making a pork liver pate yesterday, and I just used a nice solid. I mean, it's a larger than average pat of butter because it was from a local dairy. But so the shape of it and how much butter I needed, I guess I do put more butter than I would in other things. But it was probably only 2.5 tablespoons.
Okay.
I mean, not much. And then it was, trimmings from some pork cures, onion, garlic, some red wine. Some
that's a rich one.
Those sorts of things. So
that sounds wonderful. Yeah, with mine, when I get the pate, I basically poach it in butter with onions and maybe apples, but keeping all the liver rare. And then I put it into the food processor, the modern contraption, and I drop in as many cubes of butter as I think it is possible for the emulsion to hold. And it ends up being super tasty and also super buttery.
Yeah, it's a superior addiction to heroin, I think.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, in general for one's health. It sounds like you have a dairy problem and you need a cow.
Oh, so that's the other thing we're going to talk about. We actually have things to talk about with you.
We're getting there.
Okay. I know, it's terrible.
Okay, wait.
We have to mention the class.
Let's talk about the class.
Let's talk about the class. Yeah, important.
That's the homework item, housekeeping, and then we'll talk about other fun things, I guess. Well, the class is fun.
Yeah.
That do come. Okay, Ross, tell us about the class.
Okay, this is the first ever Backwater Foie Gras, the Art of Foie Gras class with Brandon Sheard of Farmstead Meatsmith. And it's going to be great. I'm excited. I don't think that you can do this anywhere else in the continental United States. I think this is the only place you can do this. And it's going to start out with learning gavage. The first morning that you're here, you will learn gavage. And then we'll move straight into slaughter, because obviously carcasses must chill. So we're going to start with slaughter right after gavage. And that gavage, everything is going to be hands-on. So my wife keeps peeping in the window and she's smiling like really intensely. So something exciting must have happened. Anyway, like I'm like really kind of anxious. But anyway, so I'm sorry. But so I'm going to sit down with you on a stool right next to you, and I'm going to coach you through the process of feeding a duck by hand in a gentle but firm and deliberate manner. And awesome. I'm going to coach you through the manner in which you feel the crop to ensure that the duck is getting just the right amount of corn. And that is exactly how much corn each duck should get. Each duck should get the right amount. And the right amount varies. And we'll talk about some general rules of thumb there. But this is, gavage is very, like, there's this idea of force feeding that you and I've discussed before, and that is, of course, always the narrative with foie gras.
Yeah.
But if you were to force feed a duck, like let's say you just like closed your eyes, you put as much corn as possible into the funnel, and you pulled the trigger and you looked away, well then I would complain also, because you would destroy that duck's insides. But the thing with gavage is it's done on a very individual basis with each duck. You have to know each duck. So you pick up every single one of those ducks, and I'm doing 88 right now, morning and night.
Wow.
So each and every duck you have to know what that duck's going to be able to take, and not more, and also not less, but most importantly, not more. So this idea of like shoving corn inside a duck until it explodes is purely a, part of the narrative of the egregore. But it's not at all how it's been done for the past 5,000 years. And so it's very much a delicate process where you do need to know what you're doing. You have to have a grasp of the anatomy of the duck and the physiology of the duck, biology of waterfowl. And you need to be, you need to pay attention. And paying attention is very difficult, but you got to do it for each and every duck.
Especially with repetitious acts.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And if you're too tired, or you're really frustrated, you're going into it angry, you're feeling impatient when you start, it's not going to be a good time.
So gavage is the school of virtue.
Oh, it absolutely is a school of virtue, which is hilarious, even what we hear about foie gras. But oh my goodness, I have no greater school right now, I think, at least on the natural level, right? In obtaining the virtue of patience, which I still don't quite have. But the longer I do gavage, the more and more I do it, the more I'm forced to grow in virtue, because I need those ducks to be happy and healthy and whole, and to come to slaughter with beautiful carcasses and beautiful foie gras. And so those motivations being there, well, that'll help you, especially when you need to feed your family and pay the bills. So we're going to do that together. And you're going to sit down and you're going to do it. I'm going to show you how to do it. And then from there, we'll go to slaughter. Brandon's very good at slaughter. And so he and I will show you how to dispatch a duck properly. Thanks to Brandon, I learned the pithing method, and it changed a lot for me as far as the smoothness of my slaughter days. So thank you. And he'll show you that. And we'll also go through the proper evisceration of a duck that's been fattened for foie gras. I'll coach you through removing the foie gras, which is like the most delicate process. It has to be done very carefully, because that's a precious item that has to be preserved intact. And it's like holding hot butter in your hand, so it's extra difficult due to that factor. And then we'll move from there to putting those ducks. We'll cool those ducks down, We'll go and we'll show you the whole production here from the day the ducks arrive on the farm to the day they're slaughtered. We'll run you through all the best practices that we use to raise our ducks. And then we're going to do dinner. We're going to do dinner. We're going to sit around the fire pit. I'm going to talk with you. Brandon's going to talk with you. And then I'm going to leave Brandon all alone for about an hour and 15 minutes while I go and do gavage in the evening. And you'll be welcome to watch. If you want to observe that, you can definitely observe that. But I'll be just cooking through. I'll be going as quickly as I can because we'll all be tired. But and then the following day,
to see you doing that. I mean, of course we can't intervene, but like that's actually a really educational too, is just to watch what it can look like when you've had years of practice behind you. So.
And it'll look kind of perfunctory, to be honest, because I'll just be like, you'll see me just swipe a duck, throw him between my knees, do the feeding, let him go, and then swipe another one, But that'll show you a rhythm, because obviously for the sake of having an ordered life, you will need to be very efficient when you do gavage, so that you can get each duck done in about 30 seconds, right? And then from there, we're going to do the cookery. Day 2 is going to be all about breaking down the ducks and we might do at least one cure. We'll see. And then we're going to do the confit, we'll render the duck fat. We'll break down the duck into all its cuts. We'll do kind of a flying lunch that day, because we're going to, we'll be cooking as we break them down. We'll just be cooking the breasts and prep the legs for confit, that sort of thing. And you'll take home your duck and your foie gras. And then we'll finish that day also with dinner. So it's going to be a good time. Oh, we're also going to do gavage day 2. So there's going to be a second gavage session where it will be hands-on day 2. So you'll get 2 sessions with me doing that. That way you can go home with some confidence. So,
that is incredible. And you're going home with a duck.
You're going home with a big old fat duck.
That's incredible. Yeah. I mean, this is like, I dreamed about learning this for years, actually. And I tried it on my own with a duck, and I gavaged him for 30 days. And it was 30. It ended up being more. It was like 40 days. Yeah. And it was exactly what you said. I know enough to be docile and to read his signs, his signals of how he was doing before, during, and after gavage. I could read him. I could feel him out. And it was, I never got a hepatic liver off of him. I got a lot of subcutaneous skin, fat. So fat right on his skin. So that was great. But it was tricky. And it was when we eviscerated him, it was like, all right, little tiny, very dark, healthy liver. It's just a little guy.
That had been the most frustrating moment. I can't imagine.
I can't imagine. I kept my expectations low, because the whole time I was so sensitive to not wanting to overdo it on him. And I'm absolutely confident that I never overstuffed him.
Right.
And I think that's part of why it didn't work, but also because I think I stayed too far below that line. I wasn't, like you're saying, just enough,
Right.
But I didn't know how to pre-cook the corn. And so the learning curve, all of that to say, the time it would take one to learn this on their own, I estimate would take, I don't know, like 5 years. Take a long time.
Probably a year's apprenticeship, if you wanted to. Yeah, it's definitely takes a lot of time. And I might be kind of a strange example, because I had to learn so much of it on my own. Yeah. With the help of some friends, but it's not like I could go take a year in France and do it at a foie gras farm. That was not an option. So, but I think that's been very helpful for me in many ways too. But there's definitely that frustration. And also, one thing to keep in mind is not every duck is going to produce foie gras, and you've got to account for that too. The highest yield we've had was beautiful. It was like over 90% yield amongst the ducks that we harvested from that particular batch. I've had though extremely low yields, and a lot of it's based on temperature. And then there can be some changes that really affect you, which we'll talk about also, because there's so much detail to go over. But one of those things is, the same type of corn cooked the same way. And then, timing of gavage and all those things. And if your systems break down at any level, maybe not your fault, just it, machinery. Like we had to basically retrofit an old hand duck scalder to make it cook corn the right way for us. But it broke down a couple times. And so there were days between when it broke down and when it was repaired, where we had to cook corn another way. And that will affect the ducks because they notice. And it'll affect their stress levels. It'll affect all kinds of things. So we'll go over all of that. But in order to bring that duck from a duckling all the way up to harvest, there's a lot of things that have to be done properly, including supplemental nutrition during the winter, besides just whatever mash you're giving them. But all those things we'll go over and you'll go home with, and you can take a lot of notes. And I've written a document that is called Steps to Successful Gavage that I'll print out as well, that we can hand out. But it really is worth it. And I'd say though, if you want to try this, you got to have the right kind of ducks. You've got to have good ducks and good grain. And if you have good ducks and good grain, you're set up to a great degree for success. And then, yes, you need a lot of patience. But this was something that people were doing as just part of the peasant household economy in France. And a lot of times it was like the grandmother or the grandfather, right, who'd have the little I was going to say, I think I was going to say a word in English that's actually a French word, and it wouldn't have made any sense. But they would have a little pen of ducks or geese right outside, the kitchen door. And then they go out there and they'd hand feed those 10 geese or those 10 ducks or whatever. And then guess what? When it's time for Martinmas or it's time for Christmas, that's the one that's getting harvested. And not only are you going to have this beautiful, very fatty carcass and all of the luxurious lipid goodness that comes from that, but also that foie gras, which is a culinary crown jewel. So I'm really excited. I think especially because Brandon and I are doing it together, it's going to go really smoothly and we'll be able to move from one step to the next without too much interruption. I'm excited to share this knowledge because it's like there's 6 of us in the United States that do it, 5 or 6 now. And that has to be passed on to somebody. And it's such a beautiful tradition that it ought not to be lost. And it can be lost in just a generation. So, yeah.
This conversation will be continued in a forthcoming Part 2 episode. Thanks for listening, and peace be with you.